Welcome to Sober Dad Crew, the podcast where we talk about all things sobriety, recovery, parenting, music, tattoos, work, and more. For more information, please visit soberdadcrew.com. My guest this episode is Corey Hennings, host of the Sober by Design podcast. I was on his podcast about a year ago, and it's always fun to switch the tables and interview the person that interviewed you. Corey and I talk about sobriety, recovery, parenting, and even have a little fun and talk about our favorite music of 2024. All right, Corey, welcome to Sober Dad Crew.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Absolutely. I was trying to remember because you interviewed me for your podcast, Sober by Design. Was that 2 years ago? Year and a half?
Probably about a year and a half ago, something like that. Yeah, it's been a bit.
Yeah. It was like pretty early on, like in my podcast history. And now I'm up into, episodes going towards the mid 50s, which kind of blows me away. I just sort of keep going, lean into it, and keeping finding cool people to talk to.
Yeah, I think I'm at about 50 now as well. So it's been, it's a good time. It's, for me, it has replaced other parts of my recovery. So I just enjoy doing it. So thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah. And, I've gotten some feedback from folks along the way. So I know that there's, some value there. And yeah. It feels good, and it is like talking to other people about their journey really, for me, helps me in my journey. But, just sort of to set the stage, how many kids do you have?
Yeah, so I have two boys. One is 19, and the other is actually turning 13 tomorrow. So two teenagers in the house for a...
All right, happy birthday.
Year.
Yeah, I've got... One will turn 13. She'll turn 13 in January. 8 is a son. So technically those two are my stepkids, but I don't view them as stepkids. And then I've got my daughter is 17. So she's a senior. We were just working on her FAFSA tonight. Good times and college essays and all that stuff. And the oldest, he is 21 and he works in the trades doing HVAC stuff. So he was on call this week, so he's real busy in upstate New York.
Oh yeah,
right now,
like with snow and stuff, right?
Yeah, and like people's furnaces break, and they actually want heat. Funny thing, but yeah. And then, did you always want to be a dad?
It's a good question. I was talking to somebody about this just this morning. I said I didn't know what kind of dad I would be. Because I didn't really think about it much. So I believe I did always want to be a dad, but I didn't really think about it up until probably I was, 22, 23 years old. And then it started to creep into my brain.
How old were you when the first kid was born?
So I was just about 30, right? Somewhere right around there, 29.
Yeah. So, right. I was like, I guess, because if he's 21 and I'm 54, so I was like early 30s. It was later than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know, maybe a smidge more wisdom. I have no idea. So what kind of dad do you think you are? Like, how would you describe yourself as a dad?
I mean, right now, I would say I am pretty active as a dad. I have managed to really become part of my children's lives. I always say to my kids and my wife, it's like us four are the most important thing, and how we interact with each other is really important. I've coached both of my kids in sports, so I've been a soccer coach, a baseball coach. I, volunteer at the schools. I chaperone field trips. I really try to also, as much as I'm involved with them, I try to be a role model outside of the house with my work ethic. And then, I'm tough on them, but in a loving way, right?
Yeah.
I try to make sure that they know how to do things and they are contributing to the household through chores so that when they leave here, they're like a person that goes into the world. and can contribute to the world, right? Like that's my job. That's how I look at being a dad, you know?
Yeah, I've always said like the most important thing is like to put good people out into the world. It feels more now, like that feels even more important right now than maybe it did in the past, but I think it's always been true.
Yeah. I mean, when I get comments back from people like at the camp that they go to, that they're the ones that help clean up after lunch or after an event or whatever the case may be, that's feedback that's telling me that I'm doing a good job, because realistically, you don't know until, they're out of the house and contributing to society. I mean, you get these like little cues throughout, right? Like you can tell you're on the right path, but you're not going to know fully until they're like a person in society of how they're going to be. So,
yeah, especially with the oldest, there's been a few things, like there's always been this whole sort of conversation we've had around consent and all that stuff. And we've had a few conversations as he got older and was going to parties and doing all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, like that took, like you not only understood what I was saying about the importance of consent and intervening if you need to intervene, or teaching your friend, like you actually did, like you have applied that, and to me, that's such an outlook on the world that's important. And so it is gratifying when especially when they get older and you talk about this stuff and you're like, oh, it took, I did it. I did the thing. I am putting out a good human being that like cares about.
I think we put a little bit too much into our older one sometimes though, Stephen. Like I gotta say, like I always say like one of them is like Captain America and the other one's a little bit like Loki, and I need the middle ground, right? Like
right.
I need a little bit less in each of them. And like my older son wants to be in law enforcement. He is the save the day kind of guy, and which is great. And he has a long-term girlfriend, and he's very responsible. And the other one is a little bit more freewheeling, and we raised them both the same, so that's the whole nature nurture thing. Like I can't blame it on anything that we did. It's just one is going to be a thrill seeker and the other one's going to be, a law enforcement officer.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're kind of wired how they're wired, right? You can't change the wiring. I mean, it's one of the challenges of parenting, but I think it's also one of the things that's kind of cool and interesting is you got to approach them all with a little bit of a different angle. Like the one motivates one or works for one doesn't necessarily work for any of the others.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in coaching, I've seen it too. So I've been able to coach, again, both of my boys in different sports. And I had one soccer team that stayed together for, like 5-6 seasons. So I got to see a lot of those boys grow up and, go through different phases. And yeah, everybody's different and everybody responds differently to criticism or, praise or, some sort of, I don't want to call it punishment, but if I made certain kids run, they did not like it, and others would just do it and heads down,
right.
And the thing. And, everybody's just got a different thing and you got to figure it out and then try to work around it to move them forward.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm a Formula One guy, so I was watching the race today. And at the end of the race, one of the announcers, it was the last race of the season, and was talking about how, the important part of Formula One is these teams aren't a culture of blame. It's a culture of responsibility. I thought about like my own workplace with that, but also in the family parenting sense too. Like, oh, right, we're trying to create like a culture of responsibility within our family so that people just kind of, do the right thing and the responsible thing.
Yeah. We, one thing I will say is as the kids age, right? So 19 and 13, the 19-year-old is now kind of shifting out of the house. He still lives at home and he contributes, but it's a different contribution now. and trying to have to balance that out with the 13-year-old who is maybe doing a little bit more than he used to do. And, then he looks over, why isn't my older brother doing XYZ? He used to. And balancing that is new for all of us and different. So I don't know if you've went through something similar.
We have, and it's been interesting too with some of the COVID ripples. The 21-year-old kind of graduated from high school, was that COVID graduate. And so now watching the 17-year-old in her senior year, I'm like, oh, that's what they're supposed to be doing. Not like stuck at home watching like Schitt's Creek, which was great and nice as a family, but you were supposed to be out with your friends. And another sort of angle on that responsibility is we always talk about guardrails, right? Like as a parent, we're just trying to keep guardrails up so you don't fly off the road. And the guardrails for a 19-year-old are different than a 13-year-old, right? Because ideally the 19-year-old has, learned and become more responsible as an adult. So theirs are going to be different. They have more leeway to move around the road.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the guardrails can be lower. We still don't want them to fly off the road, but those sort of shift as kids age. But boy, to your point, like the 13-year-old totally observes. They observe and they will let you know if the standards appear to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also, I warned my 19-year-old as he was maybe a little bit younger, and he would intervene when we were doing like yard work or chores because he was tired of the slow pace of the younger brother. Right. And I said, stop doing that. We got to teach him. He's got, you got the time to mess up and, take your time, and we need to give him the same. And, that balance for me was really hard to try to, keep both of them in line so that, the older brother felt useful and then the younger one was learning, and yet we were still getting the work done because it was like, that became really tricky as we moved on. And now sometimes my older son will look at his brother and go like, why does he take so long still? I said, because you did too much, you did too much, but it'll all work out,
Yeah. And one of our, I don't know, challenges, but one of our dynamics too is when it is a step parenting, like we merged families and we had different styles and even different things that each kid was held responsible for. So we, navigating that has, been a process for us from time to time. Like, okay, like these two were sort of held to this and these two are held to that. And how do we sort of find this way that honors both experiences?
Yeah. I mean, I had something similar growing up. I had half brothers and a half sister, and I could tell you that there was differences even in that, right? Like it was just like I watched how I grew up, and then I watched how maybe my half brothers grew up in the same house, same two parents. But and this isn't to criticize anybody, but I probably learned a little bit more and did a little bit more manual labor than either of my half brothers, and
yeah.
It's just the way it was for whatever reason.
Yeah. Let's pivot a little bit and sort of to the point that you're comfortable, what's your sort of sober journey?
Yeah. Yeah. So sober journey. So I didn't actually start drinking until I went to college. I was a kid that grew up around an alcoholic parent, and I said I would never drink. And I was pretty darn sure that was the truth. And then I got to college. One night I went into New York City. I was with old high school friends. We went to a bar and they served us for some unknown reason. I mean, I looked like I was 10, and they just like
different times.
Yeah. It was crazy. Just shots out on the bar. Right. And that was the start. And it, I felt different. I guess I liked it, and it kind of just progressed throughout college. and I was able to keep it under control. And that kind of just continued on until I was 35. In there was a lot of drinking and good times and bad times. I remained married to my wife, and I managed to keep jobs and get a master's degree and do all of the stuff and drink without any real consequence to the outside world. However, at home with my wife, it was a challenge, right? Like I wasn't the best husband. I would stay out late. I would be, drunk when I should be sober, and I couldn't control it. It just was, something that I had zero control over. I tried to stop a few times, go to AA after a really bad night or after doing something really stupid. I would go to a meeting, and it just didn't feel right. I had a personal issue with AA. My mom got sober in AA, and I kind of saw it as an equivalent to her drinking. She just dove headfirst into AA and was there all the time. So she became absent from, the family life. When she got sober, she kind of just replaced her drinking with her recovery program. So I had a hard time with AA. Fast forward through lots of, tumultuous times, and 2012, the day after my wife's birthday, I woke up after having passed out at her birthday party. And I knew that
wives love that.
Yeah, really love
like it. Super good. They're like, I know what I want for my fucking birthday this year, and it's for my husband to pass out at the party. Wrap that shit in a bow.
Yes. Yes, I know how much she liked it because she wasn't in bed with me when I woke up.
I know she was she cooking you breakfast?
Yes. Yes, that's where she was. So I got up, got in the shower, and just thought to myself, I need to change something or my entire life is going to go away. At that point, my younger son was 1 year old. My older son was about 6. And I just, I said, I'm going to lose everything. Like, this is it. Today is the day, or, my whole life's going to be different. So I went to work. I don't think I said goodbye to anybody because they were all like in the back of the house.
Cooking breakfast.
And,
Cooking breakfast.
Yeah. Cooking breakfast, and I wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
And went to work. I got on my computer at work, searched up AA meetings, and found one that was about 3 miles from my office at lunch. So I went over there, and I went to the meeting, and it was me and a bunch of retirees. And at the time, 35, and I just sat and listened and went home that night. And obviously my wife was still not thrilled, and woke up the next day and did the same thing and just kind of kept doing that. And a month later, I was feeling a little bit better. Still kind of frosty at home, but things were moving towards a better direction. And, that's how it started. I kept going to AA for about 2-ish years, I would say. And I never did the steps. I never had a sponsor. Towards the end, I tried to get a sponsor, and that's when it kind of got weird for me. I kind of took what I wanted and left the rest, as they say. And at that point, I really started to read more in recovery books and listen to podcasts. Recovery podcasts had a huge part of my recovery story at that point. And then the online space, so Instagram and the sobriety community in Instagram really became strong for me. That was the early start of it.
Yeah, I always say, in all the 50 some people I've talked to, there's no one way, no right way. There's finding the way that works for you. Like, I just stopped. I did a ton of therapy, but I didn't do 12 step, but I needed to do I needed to address underlying issues, and that, the therapy did it for me. Also, just addressing at the time anxiety and depression, um, and that made a big difference. But if you did what part of AA worked for you, or there's just a lot of ways, and I think the online community in particular has shown people there's a lot of different ways to go about it.
Yeah, there's a ton of programs. There's AA, there's SMART, there's Refuge, there's Noble Steps, there's, all of the privatized ones that people have. There's coaching, there's, it goes on and on and on. I also did therapy. I mean, I should have kind of just started with that, right? Like at the time, my wife and I were in couples therapy, and we're very open about it. She was on my first episode of the podcast and we talked about it. So we were in couples therapy, and then we kind of went into single versions of it with the same person. And the therapist would always say, like, what do you think about your drinking as a problem? And I go, like, it's not a problem. I got it.
Yeah.
And like, no problem there. Like, it's other things. I have a weird disease because like my health is always so bad in the morning. Something's really wrong with me inside. There was always something that wasn't the drinking that was the problem. And
it's always other things, or it's always everybody else.
Yes.
Why does everybody hate me? I just remember being like, nobody likes me. Like, why doesn't it? I'm like, oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like the devil on the shoulder talking.
Yeah. Well, she was really good about it. She'd go like, well, maybe think about the drinking, right? And she just kind of like kept chipping away at it. And I do credit her quite a bit for it, because I think that all the seeds that were planted like that morning when I woke up, it was like, she's right. It's the drinking.
Yeah. Sounds like a good therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. She didn't push too hard, but planted all the right seeds. And then, I continued on in therapy, and I just, I guess, broke up with my therapist a couple of weeks ago, and not the same one. I had picked up a second therapist in between, maybe a third, actually. And I really do think therapy is important for everybody, recovery or not. I think it's like super important. It's like going to the gym.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of got stuff. I mean, my wife's a therapist too, so like I'm pro social worker and pro therapist. But it's true, and also for young people, it's definitely hard. It can be hard for people to find people, especially like finding therapy for kids is super duper hard.
Yes.
And then finding time when you're not pulling them out of school and all that. It's just, and if you're unresourced, it's even harder, because so many don't even take insurance anymore. It's just it can be really tricky, which is hard because it is so important.
It is. It is. And going is important. And then also doing all of the things that they suggest when you go home. I say that a lot. Like,
yeah,
you can
the
go
work
there and you can talk, but you got to do the work. You can't just go home and just think that like there's some magic that happens. It's work. Yeah.
Yeah. And not necessarily fun, right? Like digging through whatever childhood stuff, assessing your behaviors that you're not proud of is not comfortable. Always. And then apologizing for that behavior to people is not like 100% a good time.
No. Some of the worst times were actually that couples therapy stuff. I got to say, like the drive home. Oof.
Couples therapy is terrible.
Terrible.
It is not fun, but great if it works.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say for us, like, I don't think that my wife or myself had good modeling of what a couple look like. Right. So like my parents are my parents were divorced and then they got divorced again. So like, I'm not going to say that, it was awful, but like there probably wasn't great modeling behavior that I was witnessing. And the same for my wife. My wife's parents have been married forever, but that doesn't mean much, right? So like my wife will say, yeah, I didn't really learn a lot about being like a good married couple. And so we met when we were like 18. So we grew up together just kind of trying to figure it out. And never did. We needed somebody to help us. And that's what that couples therapy did, you know?
Yeah, I remember my dad saying to me once, and it was like after my divorce, and he's like, and my mom's 84 and my dad's 85, and they're still married. It's actually their anniversary today. And he's just like, I'm not quite sure like how we did it. He said the hard parts weren't that hard and they like weren't that deep, and that they kind of tracked together with their interests and all that stuff. I think that's a simplification because even the best loving relationships take like what my wife and I talk about a lot is intentionality,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the willingness to kind of have those hard conversations or uncomfortable conversations. I mean, we were just like having before this like a parenting conversation. I like can get into sort of some power struggles with the 8-year-old. I'm like, okay, this isn't working, and I'm like kind of stuck in this loop on that. So like, how am I going to find this new way to kind of interact and parent well? Because like that to me, it's like the most important thing. And so you don't want to screw it up. So we're like having that conversation. But we have these conversations and they're respectful and thoughtful. And, we're trying to sort of navigate this thing called parenting together with 4 kids with a big age range. And, they're each 2 of our biological kids. Like, it can be a lot to sort of navigate and figure out.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't know how to have that hard conversation can become a fight really quick, which can then be like a 5-day event. And that was more pre, therapy.
Pre
That's
the
all.
birthday party.
Yeah. 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 It's much better now.
Yeah.
Now we are very we're very good about having conversations, and it's been a much better environment, and we're trying to model something different for our kids, and just show them like, yeah, it's not all perfect, right? Like sometimes we have a disagreement, but at the end of the day we work it out, and it's quick, and it's not like a huge dust up.
Yeah. So a topic that comes up and sometimes gets asked back at me because I have some older kids are like, what are the conversations you've had with your boys around drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. So they both know I'm sober. My 6-year-old, he was 6 at the time. My 19-year-old obviously saw me drinking and probably has some recollection of what that is. My 13-year-old, he was 1 when I got sober, so nothing. I tell them that for me, I just can't do it, right? It is something that I can't handle. But I also remind them very much about other people in our family that couldn't handle it either. So that, we maybe have a propensity in our bloodline for overdoing things just in general. It doesn't have to be alcohol or drugs. Like, I come from a long line of people who just overdo things. My dad has like a gambling thing. My mom was an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic. There's just things, and it's on both sides. So I am very open about that. And I tell them both just to be very cautious when they go into anything, right? It's even video games. It's like, I'll check them if the video game playing goes too long. Like, hey, maybe you're overdoing that and that's why you don't feel good, or maybe you should be taking some time and doing something else. It's just anything can be overdone. I can see my little one, he loves to buy things. He's a collector. He just will go and go and go. And that is something that I've seen in my family as well. So again, just a propensity for more is better. So I always say, more isn't always great.
Yeah. What was the old MTV slogan where too much is never enough?
Yeah.
Like, that's not true.
No.
Too much is often too much.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'd throw sort of social media in there too, as a place that's really easy to get lost. And I mean, the research shows it really triggers addictive kind of behaviors.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it's
this
the same trigger,
obsessiveness. Yeah.
right? It's the same trigger that we would get when we were drinking, like that same little hit over and over, quicker, even though that's the problem. It's just so fast. And yeah, it's just a tough navigation, but I'm open and honest. And, you know, the older ones wanted to try things. He doesn't like drinking at all. So that's good. You know, obviously marijuana is legal now too. So that's a whole nother navigation thing. And, how to handle that and how to use, maybe, drugs responsibly is a trick. It's just all hard, but
It's all hard. And right now, so much of the other stuff is super dangerous.
yes.
I mean, near where my office is in Ithaca, New York, it's near, the place where a lot of unhoused people camp, and there's just a lot of people using, and it is real grim out there. Like this, it's dangerous. That's the only way to say it is dangerous.
It is. Fentanyl is rampant, and one wrong purchase from the wrong person can be death. And we have had that discussion. If anybody wants to buy marijuana, they should buy it at a legal place, not from their friend. That is kind of the one rule that we've put in place, if you would, around that. But I would say this: neither one of them are not that interested in it. My older son is an athlete. He's very into weightlifting. He was a soccer player. He drinks protein shakes and all that stuff. He's not looking to ruin his body. And the younger one, he's kind of very energetic normally, and he has like a motor that never stops. So he hasn't shown any interest, but they both know they can come to us and talk.
Yeah, and I think that as a parent, making sure you set the stage, like you can come, like no one's getting in trouble. It's the same thing. Like if you're in a bad situation, call me. We will get you and your friends out of that situation. No questions asked. We'll probably talk about it the next day, but you got a no questions asked escape valve from a bad situation.
Yeah.
And just making sure your kids know they can come and talk to you about anything. I mean, we joke that we talk about everything, like in our house. Like you bring it up, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, it's better that way. That way they're not going out and getting information outside of whatever your moral compass is, right? Like that's really what we hope to give the kids as they head out, right? Our set of morals and ethics, and that's what they're going to enter the world with, if nothing else.
Yeah, because then they're out there, doing their thing.
It's a scary place.
Yeah. All right, let's super pivot a little bit, because we talked about this before. And the first time we talked, we realized we're both like big music fans. It's the end of the year. I'm always a sucker for like the year-end best of lists a little bit to see if like my tastes are validated, which is a little dumb, but like let's just kick some things around. So did you have a favorite concert this year you went to?
I had a few favorite. I do have one like number one concert, so I don't know if I'm allowed to give more than one.
You can do whatever you want.
All right.
No rules.
So I'm going to give you the top three. So the third, coming in third place, was there's a band out of the Pacific Northwest called Blind Pilot, and we had them at Newport Folk Fest for the first time back probably 8 years ago.
Yeah, and then awesome band.
They're a great band, right? And so they were recording an album in Woodstock, New York this past winter, and they played at Levon Helm's barn.
Oh, I have always wanted to go there. I've not gone there.
It is great. It is a great place. It's the first time I had been. So my wife and I drove up and back in the same night, and it was amazing. Small venue. Blind Pilot was definitely on point. They were missing one of their band members, but that was just a great like atmosphere to see a show in. And they were kind of working through the new material, and they played old stuff, but like they were working through the new material in front of the producer who was recording them the next day.
Oh, cool.
So it was pretty intimate and very cool. The second one, just saw it the other night. Actually, it was so this is coming in at second place. It was a benefit put on by Warren Haynes at Madison Square Garden for the flood relief in Carolina and Florida, and it was so Warren Haynes put it together, but Dave Matthews had been playing there 2 nights, so it was Warren Haynes, Dave Matthews, Goose, and Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats, and then just like countless guests.
Yeah.
So it was just a revolving 4.5 hour concert of guest drop-ins, like, you know, Trey playing with Dave Matthews and Dave Matthews playing with Goose, and Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi were there, and Robert Randolph. It was just like, if you're into jam music, it was pretty spectacular. And then my number one was so my kids and us really love Noah Kahan. So we had seen him a couple years ago, but this year we got to see him at Fenway Park.
Oh, is that the recorded show?
It's the recorded show.
Oh, yeah. That's cool.
He played 2 nights, so it's a mix of both nights.
Yeah.
But yes. And I love Boston. It is like second to Maine for me as just a place to go visit.
Yeah, that's one of our other points of intersection. And are you wearing a Maine OG flag sweatshirt?
I am.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I am. But the Noah Kahan thing was, first I was there with, you know, my kids, my wife, my son's older girlfriend. So like, you know, just a group of 5 people that I truly enjoy being with. And the energy was through the roof. And he was really good. It was really one of the best concerts, not of the year, but I think that I've been to. I've been to a lot of shows. So I would suggest seeing him if he tours again next summer. I think he's taking maybe next summer off, and maybe in the next fall or something, he'll tour again. But it was really cool. And Fenway is just a great venue.
Yeah, Fenway is just, and as a sports place, all like Fenway Park's just cool. I mean, there's so much history there, and
yeah.
That's
not a great music venue, I gotta say. Like the acoustics were kind of but there was like, it was just a really good energy, so it kind of overtook the bad acoustics.
Yeah, as I've gotten older, I've like want to be able to sit, you know, at a lot of shows. Standing on the concrete floors for hours is not high on my list. I mean, for me, the show, we just didn't end up at a lot of shows this year. We just had a ton going on. We're like putting an addition on our house, was Dave Hawes.
Okay.
Do you know him?
No, I don't.
He was the singer in the band The Loved Ones. And then he's kind of like in the folk punk kind of genre.
Okay.
He grew up in Philly. He and his brother and a keyboard player, that's their main touring outfit, you know, totally DIY. It's 3 guys in the van. And it was this little venue in Syracuse, the 443 Club. And like my wife and I went, you know, and you buy a little 2-top table. And I actually interviewed him on this podcast. So I talked to him, and he gave like Sober Dad Crew a shout out on the stage, which was super cool. Just like super intimate, couple hundred people kind of show, candles on the table. I mean, he's like my number one person in my Spotify Wrapped. And it's funny because I didn't know anything about him until the pandemic. And Brian Fallon from Gaslight Anthem had this little Instagram live thing he did with other musicians. And that's where I discovered him. And then I was like, oh man, I just love your music. And, you know, he's a dad and he's sober. And so like all that like super resonates.
Yeah. Gaslight Anthem, that's a good band too, huh?
Yeah, we saw them not this summer, the summer before. Like, and that was sort of the warm-up tour as they got back together. before putting out the new album, which is a great album. So speaking of albums, like I was making my list tonight, I was like, I have a really long list of albums I really loved this year. I think 2024 for me was like there's like a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, it was funny when you asked to put together the list. I definitely put thought into it, and then I was like, "What does everybody else think the top albums are?" And I went and looked at all of the magazines and stuff. And what is it? Charlie XCX, I guess, was
Yep.
like didn't
I
listen
haven't
to it.
listened to that album.
Yeah, not my
Yeah.
thing. Actually, I did listen to one song, but it was a remix with Bon Iver. So
So there you go.
So that's what I listened to, and I will say that his EP is on my list this year. So the Sable EP,
beautiful.
Yeah,
love Bon Iver, and that one in
Yeah.
particular was like really, super lovely.
Yeah, I mean short, but I always love when he drops music. So that was a good one.
Yeah, and you never quite know. It's always going to be good, but you're just not sure what you're going to get, which I like. And he'll pull in horns and strings and just, an amazing kind of musical brain.
Yes. Like if people haven't heard him or listened to him, listen to that version of it and then go listen to all his other spin-off bands because he's got multiple, and he's just a great musician. I was thinking the other ones. So Maggie Rogers, Don't Forget Me. I'm a big Maggie Rogers fan.
Love her. Yep.
So she's just consistent. And so that one was up there this year. Vampire Weekend, they put out a new one. And when Vampire Weekend first came out, it just was so different. And they were Columbia kids. So kind of the New York vibe. And it just kind of felt like old punk New York music to me. And I've liked them ever since. So the Vampire Weekend album, and I'm not a huge country guy, but we love Zach Bryan around this house. So
that is an artist where we can all intersect.
Yeah,
with Zach Bryan.
Yeah. So he is on my list. The Great American Bar Scene was a good one. We are actually seeing him in Brooklyn in 10 days.
Oh, cool. That is supposed to be a good show.
Yes. Very hard tickets to get.
But, don't throw anything on stage. From what I've been seeing lately, he gets pissed. Everyone should get pissed if you throw shit on stage. Nobody throw things on stage. Please don't.
Never.
It's just an asshole thing to do.
And then the last one for me this year is pretty recent, but Kendrick Lamar and the GNX album that he dropped. I am a hip hop guy, but it's a very specific type of hip hop. Like I like Run the Jewels, Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah,
Wu-Tang.
I'm with you. Yeah.
So, but Kendrick is really point for me, and so that album, a really good album. So,
did you listen to Diggable Planets back in the day? I've just been listening to them again. I'm like, damn, this was a great band.
Yeah. That whole like the Far Side and Tribe and that whole kind of vibe. Arrested Development was really good too.
Yeah.
Conscious hip hop, I think they called it. So I was very happy. I don't know if you watched. Did you watch the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions? We watched the whole thing.
I didn't.
And Tribe Called Quest was inducted, so that was really cool to watch, and just the whole video montage of their induction, just to see their whole story was just really great. I mean, I grew up. That was a tape, that I would play in my Walkman over and over and over. That was like all I listened to was a Tribe Called Quest.
We're guys who had tape Walkmans. That's how old we are. Did you have the yellow Sony one?
I did.
Bright yellow one.
And actually, my first
auto reverse.
Yes. My first Tribe Called Quest tape was a bootleg from just outside the Port Authority in New York, because I used to go in on the bus. So as like a 7th grader, I had no money, so I bought a bootleg Tribe Called Quest.
I used to buy bootleg stuff in Portland, Maine, where I grew up. It was in the back of this pawn shop, and you'd go through the fire escape door, and there's like all these tapes. It's so funny to me now. Like people who are only internet generation are probably like, what are you even talking about? But you would get like all these live concert bootlegs, and my friends and I, we used to record stuff, and we didn't want to sell it. We just wanted to relive being at the show.
Yeah.
Like I had no like capitalist intentions.
No. So what were your albums this year?
There was sort of this sort of whole pile of kind of post-punk stuff that I love. So Slater-Kinney, a band I love, put out Little Rope, which I thought was a fantastic album. And there's sort of lots of conversations around the origins of that, because like Carrie Brownstein's parents had died, and sort of a lot of the songs revolve around that. And then a couple of new bands to me, Sprints, put out this album, Letter to Self. They were like a British kind of new punk band. This band, Ben Stellar, who's from New York City, they put out Scream from New York. And Mannequin Pussy, I Got Heaven. Funny thing about Mannequin Pussy, if you ask Siri to like play it in your car, she'll say, now playing Mannequin beep. Which the first time that happened, I just thought was like hilarious. I was like, wow, I've been censored by my own phone. Those are all pretty like raging bands.
That's funny.
Waxahachie, love Waxahachie. Tiger's Blood, amazing. And I got to see her at this little place in Ithaca, the Haunt, which is actually it's actually gone now, but it was this very storied venue where like Nirvana and Pearl Jam played before anyone like knew who they were. And she played there a number of times, and I saw her once, and she's sober now. It was before she got sober, but it was the last show of her tour, and her voice was kind of thrash. So she just did like the band didn't play. She just played. It was amazing. It was amazing. I don't know, man, there's so many other, like Beth Gibbons from Portishead put out a solo album, which I loved. It's like really this sort of a lot of kind of stuff about mortality and getting older. And man, there was just a ton of them. So I was like pretty happy this year, is trying to like pare it down. One other I want to say, because I love this band, is Emily Davis and the Murder Police, and most people don't know her. Texas-based, another kind of folk punk person. I interviewed her for this podcast early on too, and that's like my number one. Everyone should know this band, and nobody does. They like all work day jobs to try and like make music. So like respect to that as well.
Hard. It's a hard industry to make it in.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. What about, are you guys TV? Are you a TV family?
Yeah.
Do you watch anything?
My wife and I definitely watch a lot of TV. As we put the kids down and, they're in bed, we start stuff. So we've definitely been binging. I forget what we binged.
We like fell off The Bear. We had started The Bear in season 3. We just couldn't really.
Yeah, we haven't finished it.
Deal with all the yelling.
They're intense episodes.
They're intense. The first season I was hooked, because like right when it starts, it like goes into Wilco. So I think the music curation on The Bear is incredible. But like season 3, just like one of the episodes is basically everyone yelling "fuck you" at each other. I was like, oh my God, like I can't even. So we kind of just fell off that a little bit. I really liked this show, Lioness. Nicole Kidman's in it, and Zoe Saldana. It's like a spy thing. I kind of like a sucker for spy books and movies. I don't know why. Like politically, it seems like misaligned with me, but I don't know. I like Indigo Girls documentary. I don't know if you've seen that. That was pretty great. That's on Netflix. And John Mulvaney's Baby J. Do you know him as a comedian? Like, and if you're in recovery, like that is an amazing like comedic telling of his intervention and going to rehab. Just, really brilliant stuff.
This year, what is sticking out of my head? The Diplomat, which is like a political thing on Netflix with Carrie Russell from the show The Americans.
Oh yeah, she's amazing.
Speaking of like funny recovery stuff, we started Louder Milk, which is on Netflix as well. I don't know if you watch that.
I haven't.
It's about, well, the guy's name is Louder Milk and he's in recovery. It's a little bit crass, but it's funny.
Yeah, it's good to laugh sometimes.
It is. I can't even remember all the stuff we watched. The Bear was one of them. We started watching Ted Lasso again because that's just such a good show. Just kind of gone through that a second time. I don't know. I can't remember. I'm normally really good with the TV shows, but now my brain's on music and it can't like shift off of it.
Yeah, no, well, we sometimes struggle to find TV time just between all the sports and all the everything. Or by the time we get in bed, we're just like, oh, like let's read or let's sleep. Because I really like reading. I've actually been reading. There's a new biography of REM that came out this year, which has been like, I'm gonna look it up on my phone. It was really good. And we'll throw all this stuff. I'll put all our stuff we talked about in the show notes so people can get it. But it's been really great because it kind of it's the history of the band as a whole, and then it also it's called The Name of This Band is REM. And then it also pulls their individual stories out. And, and that's a band like I've listened to, I don't know, since I was in high school and I saw them on the Green Tour. But I didn't really know that much about them kind of individually. So that was kind of an interesting piece. I sort of knew the whole Athens, Georgia, we met in school and all that, but like kind of their backgrounds was interesting. And, how they really kind of paved this way through what then we called college radio, right? Yeah. You and I would have called it college radio, and that whole network. And I don't really know if that even kind of exists the same way anymore. They would tour and they'd go to every college radio station, be interviewed by every college radio station and get back in their crappy van. It's just, I think, harder to do that stuff now.
Yeah. I don't think it exists in the same way. That's for sure. I don't know if I told you when we first talked about my brother's in music management, kind of he didn't fall into it. He really worked towards getting it. And he's got some big bands now in his group. And, a lot of the success is just based off of touring, right? That's sort of driver number one. Yeah.
That's the money.
That's where the money is. Streams or whatever. But if you can be out there touring and selling merch and connecting with the fans, that's sort of the number one way to be successful. That or having your songs licensed, I think, is the other one now.
Yeah, remember when it was like evil to be in a commercial? Like people like Sting would do commercials over in Japan. They wouldn't do it in the US because people were like, you can't do that. I'm like, you know what? Like, you got to make a living. It is hard to make a living. It's hard to be on the road all the time.
Yep.
There's lots of conversations about musicians and mental health and all that stuff because it's just a tough gig. And then coming out of COVID.
Yeah. I mean, it's a grind. For people who don't do it, it's, you are at the venue kind of early, you're setting up, you're doing sound check, you play, then you leave late, then you got to get in the, either a van or, maybe you're lucky enough to have a hotel room that night to get a real night's sleep, but you're just grinding and it is a long day. It's not all glamour, specifically for bands that are not, the headliners. I mean, they do a lot of their own stuff. So it's a big one. The other way, I guess, now is TikTok, right? You get a TikTok song and you just rock it right to fame.
Or maybe not anymore, right? Because I guess now maybe the TikTok ban's going to happen. I'm not sure. But I thought about that with Dave Haas. It was like those three guys They sold their own merch. They loaded themselves in. They did all the things. So then they loaded themselves out and onto the next thing.
It's tough. And to have a TikTok song too isn't that easy. Like, not every band has like their catalog is like set to be a dance thing, right? So it's like it's not
right
the only way. I was thinking about that when you were giving your list and then my list. It's like my tastes are very much driven off of my Spotify algorithm, or in our bedroom we have a Google Nest, and I play WCLZ out of Portland, Maine. So I'll hear new music from that is maybe outside of what my Spotify might give me. But those are really my two ways I hear anything new. I don't challenge myself as much as I used to. Just like with normal radio, you would hear a random new song, and that doesn't happen as much. It is, you're kind of in your own little circle, right?
Which is weird because it should be theoretically easier, right? Because there's so much out there. It's all on Spotify or whatever, but it is hard. And there's our bands, like I'm thinking that band Ben Stellar. I'm not even sure like how I can't remember how I stumbled on them. I mean, I'm super glad I did, but I'm like, was that somehow on Spotify? I'm not sure. I mean, I still will like listen to World Cafe, or KCRW sometimes, some of those good NPR music stations. So, right, if you do have a source for finding that stuff that's sort of quote unquote on the radio, even though really I'm just streaming it. And for me, there's a lot on NPR that's been really great. They're All Songs Considered podcast is really good.
Tiny Desk, that they break a lot of people.
Yeah. And Tiny Desk is just kind of cool because they also have some really big people, and I'm like, you're literally playing at this desk. And that's pretty fun.
The other way that you can find it on Spotify is every week they do give you your Discover Weekly, which is not the release radar, but the bands that you've hopefully never heard of.
Yeah. But it is a weird thing. So remind me, because I don't remember from the first time we talked, what's your because I grew up in Maine. So what's your Maine intersection?
Yeah, I don't really know how it started. When my wife and I were in college, we had a friend who had a house on Nantucket. So we would go up to Nantucket for spring break. We had no really reason for being there. We were not wealthy people. It was just kind of like us and some beer, and we watched Nantucket high school softball. But that got us like in love with New England. So as soon as we can kind of go on vacation, I think the first time we went up to Maine, we just went and we camped. We bought a tent and we went up to Freeport, Maine, and we camped, and we kind of fell in love with it. And we've been going up ever since. Now, and we, at the time, my uncle was in college, or no, he must have graduated, but he was up there, but he was like the same age as us, and he was just getting his feet under him. So he didn't really have a place to stay. But now when we go up, we see him, and my wife has some family up there as well. And since then, another aunt and uncle of mine have moved. So yeah, some family, but more just a love for the New England coast. We lived in Newburyport, Massachusetts for a while as well.
Oh, okay.
So just south of the New Hampshire border.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a lot of my heart's in Maine. My folks are still there, and it's been hard because my mom moved into memory care this year. So it's, and she was in the hospital this week. So it is hard being far, it's like not that far, but it's also far. But yeah, and it's been fun to introduce my wife and my younger kids to Maine and the ocean and all the things that we love in Portland. And it just, Portland, Maine is a great friggin' city. Especially for a smaller city, the food scene's really good. There's just a lot going on there.
I mean, it's changed a lot since we first went up, but it's still very accessible. The cost is going up a little bit, but it is an accessible city, and we just love the people are. I always say Maine is like a place where you kind of know people have differing opinions, but they don't lay them out in front of you because they know they might need your help one day, right? It's like,
yeah. and they'll help you even if they
Yes.
don't agree with you. Good lesson to
Yes.
everybody, like we got to get back
Yeah.
to that place where you just help people, not because of any political alignment or
That's how my
misalignment.
neighborhood is. I mean, me and my wife might be the sole like democratic kind of independent leaders on a street. And, but like if a tree falls down, we're all there helping. Oh, it's just the way it
Yeah.
is. It's like I think the more rough area, and rough, I mean like just like big snowstorm, a tree, like I feel like those areas where you need to rely on your neighbors, people kind of let that other stuff kind of just settle. It's not as important. And that's how I see it. But, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I live in a much more rural area, and it's definitely more politically conservative than I am. But there's like you got to find those ways to intersect with people who you don't always align with politically, because like we all love our kids, we all want the school to be good, right? There's so many
Mm-hmm.
commonalities.
Yeah, same here. I mean, we stick out, right? Like I was a big Bernie supporter. I got a lot of Bernie t-shirts. I'll wear the Bernie t-shirt out, you know. Probably the only guy in my county with a Bernie t-shirt.
You might get a
I
trophy
don't
for
know.
that.
I
I
haven't
don't
got
know.
one yet.
So do you guys have any holiday traditions?
No, not really. That's I was talking to somebody about this. I mean, Thanksgiving we go to Maine. So that's been tradition for us. Christmas has been hard for me my whole life. I was a divorced child of divorce, so I kind of got passed around on Christmas. And then it was just like, once I got passed between the two parents, then I was going to three different other places. So Christmas was always just like driving around. And then I got married
Right.
or met my wife, and it was like, now we have more. And so it was always just this day of like movement. And when we had kids, we tried to settle it, but for some reason, we're still driving around. So no real traditions. No, you?
Yeah, it's funny, like I was definitely like edgy, this week. And I used to, when I first got divorced, like I didn't have a lot of money. My folks were in Maine. Like I was here in New York with my kids, and I didn't like the holidays were so stressful. And I just felt like I was trying to muscle through and make them good for the kids, make it special. And, my older kids get older. I got remarried. I progressed in my career. So those sort of financial stresses went away. And I was like, okay, like I can really kind of enjoy the holidays now. And then this week, like it was my 54th birthday. And like the day before, my mom's in the ICU. And I'm like feeling that edge. And, like I think anyone who's like
Mhm.
worked on their mental health, when you're like feeling your edge. And I was like, oh, it's that feeling again of like, kind of like fuck you holidays. Like you're just stressful. So I had to like really work my way through that, because because we have an 8-year-old, he 100% is all fucking in. So when we here do Elf on the Shelf, which is something I didn't do, and when I met my wife and I started living there, I think I elevated it a little bit, like a little crazy. So this year, like we made like a hot air balloon situation. I mean, it wasn't a really hot air, but it was a bunch of balloons, and like the elf is in the thing, like on this string that goes across the house, like flying in. So it becomes this nightly, like, oh shit, what are we going to do? Like
Mhm.
with the elf. But it's good. Like that magic, like doesn't last that
Yeah.
long,
Yeah.
So, and my in-laws do this really beautiful Christmas Eve thing. They have a pond, and we go out by the pond, and there's like a ceremony with the water that's really like meaningful. So that's a sort of beautiful tradition that I'm blessed to be a part of now. So, that kind of thing. We got our tree. So we're like kind of doing the thing. It is like the older kids go between a couple of houses, and there's some like navigation with the stepkids on what they do on Christmas. So, there's a little of that, but you just kind of got to roll with it.
I wish we had something.
And then New Year's, I usually stay home because I'm old.
Yeah, we never did Elf on the Shelf. And I do wish we had something that was like a little bit more concrete. But it just hasn't popped up yet. Maybe as, I don't know what's going to trigger it, right? Maybe a grandkid or something like that, but it's really triggered it.
So. Yeah. Isn't it funny when you start thinking about like that's becomes not out of the realm of panic?
Yes.
Right. There's certain years you're like, no grandkids, no fucking grandkids. And then they're like, still all mine, I think, are too young and not ready, but it is a little funny to be like, oh, right, that could be a thing.
Yeah, I have a friend just became a grandfather. So it's real. Like, it's in my circle. So, yeah, not
Well, and it's funny a little bit for me too, because I'm with the younger two. I'm definitely an older dad in that set, And if I've, when my facial hair has grown out, it's definitely much grayer. Yeah, I kind of had it, and then I was like, yeah. So I shaved it. It just kind of is a constant variable thing. Because shaving's a pain in the ass.
It is. I hate shaving, but I also hate being like the gray, and then I hate when I shave because I look ridiculous and just like no.
Yeah, right. And then your chin's all red because you hadn't shaved, and you're like going to work.
There's really no good.
My God. So yeah, old first world problems.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, this was really fun, but like, shout out your podcast. Tell the people.
Yeah, so I do the Sober by Design podcast. I put it up pretty much weekly if I can manage to swing the guest. And, we talk about a lot of the same stuff that we just talked about here. I've had some random guests on for sure, and I have some people who are not in recovery but have something to add. I do feel like some of those folks can, every once in a while, add some wisdom that we need. So you can find me on Instagram at the Sober by Design podcast. I'm on Spotify, Apple, and I think all of whatever the main podcast things are. Those are the two big ones. So I'm there, and I think I'm also on Pandora and one other big one. I don't even know. I should be much better at promoting my podcast, but I'm not.
Yeah, it's hard. It's time consuming. But I will say, for both of our sakes, listeners, please do like and subscribe and comment and all that stuff, because the evil fucking algorithm likes that. And I don't want to have to make little videos of myself talking. So if you can, or if anyone wants to sponsor either of our podcasts, I'm sure hit us up. We would happily take your money.
That is the bane. You need the likes and you need the subscribes, because otherwise it just falls down the list.
Yeah. And I think people do find us. Like, we found each other out there, and I think the sobriety and recovery community online is really real, and it's really vibrant. And there's, different groups on Facebook. I've been exploring more on LinkedIn. There's sort of these more developing networks of sort of, I don't know what somebody called me an executive the other day. I was like, I don't think I'm an executive. I don't know if I even want to fucking be an executive, but sober professionals who are like public about it. And we were talking because we were on a board together, and she's like, yeah, everybody like talks about, they're like, oh, there's that guy, Steven, at like the architecture firm. And so she's sober too. So I'm going to actually interview her in a couple of weeks. But it is that sort of like, in the professional world, like that's maybe not the newest frontier, but the whole notion of like recovery out loud, I think, is so important, and why I do it.
Yes.
I do.
Same reason that I do it, just so that, people can feel comfortable. I've done it out loud, and I know some friends of mine have found their recovery just because I was speaking of mine, right? And the workplace is a trick. So I'm glad that you're out there doing it on LinkedIn. I'll search that up because that is the next frontier. I'm always the guy that's like, hey, we need some like non-alcoholic options that are not water or soda at our holiday party.
Yeah. I think last year, did we get a mocktail last year? Like I was like right on everybody. Because I go to like a lot of hospital galas, the place you would think would have some of those options. And I'm like, don't pour me a seltzer in a plastic glass. I'm not like 7 years old. Like I can have a glass.
Yeah.
Like
I kind of felt like finally I was like high enough up in my company where I could make that demand of like, hey, come on.
Yeah, I didn't talk about it at work for a long time. And then finally I was like kind of a similar thing. Like in my career, I was far enough along and I just think office culture is so important. Like we spend a ton of time at work. Like I want to work at a place that is cool and respectful and I like the people. Like we're there for hours and hours and hours every week. I'm with at work, I feel like more than I'm at home, right? So the place I work and that culture and environment just is so important. And that intersects, and I see it more and more with younger staff. Like younger people are drinking less. And that sort of notion of like the happy hour, like let's go out for happy hour, I think it's like an older culture of work.
Yeah, they don't want to go out. They want to do, if they do, they want to do something like, I don't know, throw an axe or go-kart racing, or they want to do an activity more than they want to go drinking with like a bunch of 50-year-old people.
That sounds terrible.
That sounds like I don't even want to do it.
Except we don't drink. I don't even want to do that. I usually just want to go home.
Me too.
At the end of the day. Like I'm tired. I've been up for a long time. I've wrestled a teenager out of bed and into school in the morning. Like that in and of itself is a tiring endeavor.
Go home. That's all. I don't want to go to your parties.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And younger staff also are sort of like, why I just want to like do my job and do it well, but go home, be with my people or go out with my friends. I don't need to like be owned by the workplace.
Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting from everybody as well. So I don't know. We got to change it and really adapt to it, and we'll figure it out, I'm sure.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thank you so much. And like happy holidays.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening. Sober Dad Crew is a DIY project by Stephen Kimball, who writes, edits, and produces the show. To support the show, please review it where you listen to podcasts or visit SoberDadCrew.com to buy some merchandise or make a donation.